Oh my gosh, hello. Natalie, hello.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here.
I'm
Finally.
excited that you're here. I want to ask you about your we were just talking a little bit about your pictures in the background. Is there some lore there? Like what I'm curious.
Yeah, there's actually a ton of lore. So oh my gosh, yeah. After this is kind of like my travel wall. I don't know if you can
Okay.
see. This is like I went to Greece with my best friend. So that was from there. This is from Vietnam, which was my first international trip like a few years ago. Um, That is from Peru in the Amazon. So
Oh,
then
you went to Peru.
I did, yeah. My partner's actually Peruvian, so I got to spend like 7 weeks down there. Stop. What?
No, no, no. I'm trying to filter what I'm thinking, but I'm just going to say it.
Say it.
My last 6 months in Philly, we're still friends. I hooked up like almost exclusively with this Peruvian guy. And so,
Oh my gosh.
and so that's what came up for me. I wasn't gonna say anything, but I'm like, who cares?
I love it.
Yeah, he's probably watching. Hey Mario.
Hey,
But
Mary.
yeah, so that's so funny. We talk about Peru all the time. I was supposed to go to Peru at the end of the summer, but the flights were like a little bit extra.
Yeah, totally. It can be pretty extra, but it's beautiful. I mean, yeah, I felt super lucky because I got to go with him and like all his family was there and we did a big road trip and yeah, got to
Mhm.
Pichu. So the whole thing is cool.
I love that. The hike to Machu Picchu is like, what's that like?
So we didn't hike it, thankfully, because I think it's like I don't even know, but it's like the tallest mountains you've ever seen, and you're like down at the bottom, and there are people that do walk it, and there's like a 4 day trail if you go from the back, but like yeah, there's I think it was something like 10,000 like steps or something. I don't know. So we took a bus.
Yeah, I'm like, can I get a golf cart?
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't have to do all that.
yeah, no way. So
I don't need the like experience. Like, it's
just take me to the place.
yeah, just take me there. Um, I love it. That's so fun. I love the lore of your wall.
Yeah.
I'm excited to talk to you. So we're gonna talk about trauma.
Of
Um,
Yes.
which I feel like is like such a hot button word for therapists. It's like, what are like the top like three words that you say more than any other words? And I feel like trauma is probably like maybe one, two, or three,
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
all of them.
Yeah, no, I think trauma's really up there right now.
So I want to ask you first, you're in California,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
What part of California are you in?
So I'm based in Santa Monica, but my practice is virtual. Oh, I love all your faces. Yes, tell me.
Oh my God. Santa Monica. The first thing that comes to my mind, actually, I've been ruined by Chappell Roan, is like, oh, Santa Monica, you've been too good to me. It's good for you. I daydream about Santa Monica.
Yeah, it is
Mhm.
definitely a daydream. I feel like I'm living in a daydream while I'm here, you know? I grew up like an hour north of here in the desert, so Palmdale, which is like everyone's like, "Oh, Palmdale." It's like, "Yeah, Palmdale." So, whatever. But growing up, I would always come down here, so it's really cool to be here now as an adult and living my life here. I just never,
You're
imagined,
doing it.
I guess, and yeah, so it's really cool. Yeah, I feel super lucky. Rent control
You're doing
apartment.
it.
Let's go.
You're in a rent controlled apartment.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's no
I'm
way I
in
could do it
I'm
otherwise.
in Brooklyn, New York. So I am not in a rent controlled apartment.
Eek.
And that's
Oh,
all I'll say about that.
yeah, that's pretty rough.
Um, so there is some jealousy that is being emitted to you virtually.
Well, come visit anytime.
I would
There's
love
a couch.
to. Oh my god. So I love it. So I am curious about like your practice, who you predominantly work with. So before I get into like these gajillion questions that I've developed, who do you know who's your typical client? Like who do you typically work with?
Yeah, so my typical client is somebody that has experienced some type of violence in the home, whether it's like emotional, physical, sexual. A lot of my clients come with the background of some level of violence in the home. So that can look a million different ways. I mean, like alcoholism, it can look, yeah, like I said, like sexual abuse, domestic violence between parents, physical abuse themselves. So that's the type of clients that I work with.
Hmm. That is really interesting because I feel like I see a lot of stuff about DV online. I
Yeah.
feel like I see a lot of that. I actually, when I was in undergrad, I was a research assistant on a study.
Mm.
I feel like I've said this a million times every episode. I feel like this comes up somehow.
I don't know what year
But
it
we
is.
okay, perfect. So we were studying interpersonal violence in
Mhm.
LGBTQ couples related to alcohol.
Oh, interesting.
So we had this whole setup where we had this. It's a long story, but anyway, we would basically get participants drunk, and
Mhm.
then like do different experiments to gauge their level of like you know IPV, like interpersonal violence or whatever the risk was. That was a
Oops.
terrible explanation, and I take full accountability for that. But anyway, that's what was popping up for me whenever you were mentioning that. That's kind of what you predominantly work with.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Hmm.
So it's usually, people that are kind of understanding for the first time that what was happening in their family wasn't, you know, healthy or typical.
Hmm.
So it's really interesting work because, the ACEs, do you know about the ACEs study that happened through Kaiser? It was like, I think in the 90s.
I don't think so, but I need to know.
Yeah. So ACEs is adverse childhood experiences. And basically what that is are experiences that can cause trauma from early childhood. So things such as intimate partner violence, alcoholism, having a parent be like incarcerated or have mental health issues. So basically it's a study that showed that the more of those kind of adverse childhood experiences you have, the greater risk for health issues later on in life, especially around the heart health. So hypertension, high blood pressure, like more higher stress levels, higher likely use of alcohol or substances to cope, all correspond with those adverse childhood experiences. Um, yeah. So really interesting. The study was initially done with middle class clients and mostly white people that had health insurance. And so later on, they expanded it to include different types of like cultural violence. So, such as racism, living below the poverty line, all that kind of, um, yeah,
Hmm.
it got expanded.
You said something that was really interesting to me about. I feel like I was just talking about this the other day about people that don't know that what they had was an adverse childhood experience.
Hmm.
So that's really interesting because I was just thinking about like my limited experience in my internship that I did and about people that would describe experiences and they did not realize that what they were experiencing was atypical. And so what they were coming to me and telling to me, I'm clocking as this is not normal. And then the way they're talking about it, I'm realizing they don't realize that this wasn't normal. And they don't
Yeah.
realize that this doesn't happen
Right.
in a typical family.
Sure.
Can you
Sure.
talk about what that's like with a client when you're hearing them describe something or you're hearing them talk about something and you're gauging, oh wait, this person doesn't realize that what they've experienced is not typically what people experience.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's interesting. I think people have more awareness than they realize, and I think what oftentimes we're doing is just kind of validating what people I think really inherently know, So
Hmm.
when someone is coming to me and explaining, I had this experience and this, like if somebody's smiling, I'll say like, oh, you're smiling while you're saying that. Like what's kind of what's underneath that? And a lot of times people will say like, oh, well, doesn't everybody do this or doesn't everybody experience blah, 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 blah. And then that opens the door to kind of say like, like, does everybody experience that? And kind of see where they land as far as like their own experience.
Do you feel
Um,
like people haven't like they kind of when they ask you what I was thinking of when they ask you, doesn't everybody have that experience? Do you think that they're genuinely asking? They're like, wait a minute. and they're looking for like, I don't think this is normal. They're kind of gauging you for.
Yeah, I think, like any good therapist, it depends, right? Like it just kind of depends on the person and their own experiences. Sometimes people are looking for validation that they're allowed to feel some type of way about their experience, or sometimes people are genuinely asking and people don't actually know that what they experienced was not, typical.
Okay. Yeah. So when this is what's coming up for me now, I'm going to say that a million times.
Yeah,
Like what's
love it.
coming up for me, that's all I'm going to say.
Perfect.
I say it in my regular life now too. And people are like, Dustin, what's coming up for you? And I'm like, ah, I'm like completely like shook.
Therapies.
So I I want to touch a little bit on like somatic therapy, like where we
Yeah.
like keep things in the body, especially when it pertains to trauma and kind of what you're talking about with these experiences. So first of all, what is somatic therapy and how does somatic therapy different from other types of therapy?
Yes. So, somatic therapy, what I like to say is super basic mind body connection. So, soma is the Greek root of body, and that's all it is. It sounds like this big fancy thing, but really, cultures have been doing it. Indigenous people, African cultures, Eastern cultures have been kind of integrating this mind body connection for generations, for centuries, right? And then therapy kind of came along, the mental health world came and kind of, took it as usual. And uh, so basically, all it is mind body connection. And what we're doing in somatic therapy, instead of trying to get to the root of like a thought, we're using the body to kind of guide where we go. So, in the example of the person coming to me and asking, are you, is this a typical experience? I might slow it down and say, like, hey, let's sit with this for a second. Like, what sensations do you notice coming up in your body as you're asking this? Or what are you like? Is there an image that's associated with what you're asking? So it's really slowing everything down to kind of tune into the body.
Okay. I have to ask this question.
Go for it.
When a therapist says, "Where do you feel that in your body?"
Hmm.
What when you hear that or when I'm saying that phrase to you, like what is the significance of that? What is the significance of a therapist saying, "Where do you feel that in your body?"
Oh, such a good question. Yeah. I mean, basically, it kind of becomes a way to tap into what your body knows and what your body's holding. So, a lot of times when I ask, like, oh, like, where are you noticing that in your body? Like, people will say your chest or my chest. So, like, right now, I can feel myself getting excited, and I notice that in my chest. Because I can feel my heart going faster. I can feel like my hands are buzzing a little bit. And so, those sensations give us insight into what our body is telling us, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm gonna go even further.
Please.
What I'm assuming it's different per person, but what is our body telling? I feel like the reason I'm bringing this up is because I feel like there's a lot of people. There's a running joke, right, of like the therapist who's like, "And where do you feel that in your body?"
Totally.
And so I'm thinking about like from a client's perspective, if somebody said, if I have a therapist saying, "Where do I feel that in my body?" and I'm kind of thinking, "Ugh, I don't want to tell you where I feel. There's like this kind of stubbornness coming up. What
Sure.
What is the significance of that? Is that just where I'm holding it in my body, or is there like some connection to certain places, or I don't know what's coming up for you there?
Yeah. So for me personally, I kind of use it as a gauge to a window to the past. So if somebody brings up a sensation, then I might say something like, is this a familiar feeling? Or is this something that you've noticed before? Or, when did you feel this feeling before? And kind of it kind of gives me a window into like, okay, so maybe in this time period something was happening, right? Because like, oh, like I feel this tightness in my chest and it reminds me of when I was 3 years old and XYZ.
Mm.
And so basically it indicates wounds that may have already been there, and it can even be like ancestral, right? There have been in the book, oh my goodness. My Grandmother's Hands by Resmaa Menakem. If anybody, it's a great book about somatic abolitionism. Anyways, it's great. It's really good. But
It's on my list now.
Oh, yes, it's so
Mhm.
good. And he talks about these kind of, places that people might be holding things that might actually be from generations before. Because what a lot of people don't realize is that trauma from previous generations can impact how we act today. So trauma literally has the ability to impact what genes get turned on in our body. So
Mm.
when people talk about nature versus nurture, it's definitely both. Like you have certain dispositions and then if you're exposed to certain experiences, then those genes can turn on and yeah, so there's a lot of cross in there.
Is this where we get kind of like epigenetics and stuff, kind of like
Yes.
where things trickling down?
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
I so talking about like trauma, talking about feelings in the body, how do you have any insight on how trauma lives in the body? What is that? Is it yeah, what are this is what I do. Let me tell you what I do.
Tell me.
And I'm not going to do this anymore, but I keep doing it. So I will ask a question
Okay.
and then I will try to fill in the blank when I
Mm,
have someone to answer the question.
mm.
So I'm sorry, I'm derailing.
No.
So I'm digressing. So if somebody says like, if someone's asking me like, "Oh, your friend, that's over there, like, they said they were like a physician. Like, what kind of like medicine do they practice?" And I'll try to like, fill in the blank. And I'm like, wait, this person is here. They can literally fill in the blank. So I'm calling myself out. This is my own little therapy. I'm calling myself out for doing it right now.
Mm,
So I'm just gonna not fill in the blank, and I'm just gonna ask. So trauma living in the body.
yeah.
What's your experience with how trauma lives in the body?
Yeah. Well, now you've piqued my interest because I'm like, what do you think? Like, I am curious because different people have different information. So I'm curious what you're coming with and what you.
Yeah. So my impression would be, for example, for me, when I get really anxious, it's always chest. Like
Okay.
it's always breathing. It's always stuff like that. I mean, when I get really deep anxiety, the first symptom I experience is shortness of breath.
Mm,
So, and then, if it gets really bad, I'll experience some like dizziness or I'll feel like I'm going to, kind of pass out.
mm,
And so my experience like with the chest, what I'm thinking of is probably connected to like some childhood things of I'm very maybe physically exhausted in this situation and it's
mm.
hard for me to breathe. Or if something happens and you know what? I'm going to do something different. I'm actually just going to like, I'm going to just be honest. There were some situations when I was younger, really physical situations
Yeah.
with me and like an adult, right? And so I remember in those situations, when I was like trying to be defensive or get away or whatever, I would always become really short of breath. And so I would always really struggle to like with physical exhaustion.
Yeah.
And so I think as an adult now, my first symptom of anxiety typically is shortness of breath.
Mm,
And I
hmm.
feel like there's some connection there to kind of some of those experiences of where maybe it's not that I can't breathe, it's that the first time I felt some of those feelings was when I was physically exhausted.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Totally. Totally.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so as a result, when your body feels unsafe, which I would argue that anxiety is kind of that step into feeling unsafe, right? That shortness of breath kicks in as like what it used to be, you know?
Yeah. Um, and you're good. You just pulled that out of me. You are good.
Are you are,
Um,
are you okay? I know,
no, I'm
honestly.
fine. Ah,
I
no, I'm fine. No, I'm fine. I'm fine. This has all
yeah.
been processed. And I
Okay, oh
also
good.
I had a friend of mine. I had a conversation with a friend of mine. Again, this is where the yapping comes in.
I love it.
I had a conversation with my friend about the podcast.
Yeah.
And he was like, "You're really boundaried on the podcast." And he was like, "I think what could be helpful is someone like in mental health if you were just like if you let that down a little bit." And
Mm,
so it's interesting because when I'm editing this or watching it back or if someone's watching it or whatever, or even seeing this part of the conversation because I don't think I'm going to take this out.
right.
There's like a process there that I recognize that I did where I'm like, wait, like where the boundary literally comes down,
Mm,
where it's like I I literally thought, no, 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 am I gonna allow this? And then like was like it came down, we made the decision, we went there.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm totally fine. I'm totally fine.
Okay.
Um, thank
Can
you
I
for asking.
Yeah. Well, so that I want to speak to that too, because part of the way that I work as a therapist, and I think people should work, I don't know, whatever, people do their thing, but
Mhm.
I am very big on people feeling safe to let down that boundary. You know what I mean? So I am not one to pressure somebody into talking about something that they're not ready to talk about, right?
Mhm.
There's so many things that we can do around that to get somebody ready to go there. You know,
Mhm.
there's this like urgency and this desire to get people healed and out and blah blah blah. And it's like, no, like what we really need is time and space and slowing everything down so that feelings don't get overwhelming and that you can learn to manage it and feel safe. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because like at the base of it, what I think is a lot of people who are coming to me don't feel safe. And that's something
Mhm.
after our first session, I'll say, I want you to notice, like, I'm not a homework therapist. I don't, people have their lives. If they want it, cool, I will give it. But I try to ask after the first session, just notice throughout your week when you feel safe. And then
Mhm.
more often than not, people come back and say, I don't feel safe.
I light bulb. So I so what is it what I'm thinking of is kind of what we touched on earlier about when I asked you, like, does somebody not realize that what they've had was an adverse experience? So in that same vein, do you have clients that didn't realize maybe until you brought it up that, oh wait, I actually don't feel safe most of the time?
Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Totally. And that is kind of where our work begins.
Mhm.
I don't play with trust. I'm like, I don't want you to trust me right away. Like you shouldn't. I should have to earn that as your
Mhm.
therapist, as your person in your corner. You know what I mean? Like I and part of that is on me to make sure that the environment that they come to is safe. So that means I have to do my own work. I have to make sure that I have checked my own experiences and, I understand my identities and the histories that they carry and the ways that I show up. Those all influence how somebody can feel safe with me.
Mhm. Mhm. That's really beautiful.
Thanks.
Um, it's like
So
almost poetic. Um, yeah, so what are some somatic signs that somebody might have that might indicate that they're living with unresolved trauma? So,
yeah.
yeah, I'm curious about just to phrase it in like a slightly different way. If I am kind of moving through my day and I'm noticing certain things, what are some indicators that I actually might need to work on something like trauma related?
Sure. Yeah. I think, one that people don't often think about, but I love this is trust. Like in relationships, if you have a hard time trusting people, there's a reason for that. There's something, somebody that, showed you early that relationships are not safe. Or,
Mm,
maybe it was later in life, maybe you had a really terrible partner and whatever. But so feeling unable to trust people, I think is a big one. Not feeling safe in your world, feeling hyper vigilant or tense. A lot of people a lot of the people that I work with move through the world not realizing that they're like clenching everything all the time,
mm,
right? Because feeling relaxed means something to them. It means something that it's
mhm,
like not safe to relax my body. I think busyness. So people that keep their schedules booked, because the moment they slow down, they like feel something, that
mhm,
is totally a sign that something needs to happen. And that was one of so fun fact, I had never gone to therapy before I became a therapist. Hello. I highly recommend you don't do that. But what I realized in my therapy during grad school, because you have to go to therapy to become a therapist, I did not know that. And I had a full on meltdown. I was like, oh, like I did not expect to have to do this, but obviously that makes so much sense. Um,
mhm,
so one of the first things I noticed was like, oh, like I keep myself in this like so busy that I can't feel anything or think about anything. right? Like,
Mhm.
I'm just moving from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. I was working 3 jobs. I was on this, like, crazy dance company. I was volunteering. It's just all these things so that I didn't have to feel myself.
Mm. Yeah. What was it like? I'm gonna get a little personal, if that's okay.
Please. Yeah.
What was it like when you first started to, like, connect with yourself and, like, feel yourself, I guess?
Oh god, I have chills. It was horrible. I mean, it was so hard, you know? Because
Mhm.
it was like, oh my gosh, like through whatever my various experiences, I had kind of learned like my feelings are for me to hold because I have to manage everybody else's. I have to make sure that everyone else is good, right?
Mm.
But when I slowed down and somebody finally saw me and saw my process, it was like terrible. It was hard. And for months, like during grad school, in a pandemic, working full time, doing my associateship, doing, still maintaining that busyness, but then having somebody see me in that busyness, avoiding my own stuff. So it was like, oh God.
Mhm.
But it led to a lot of changes that I, didn't expect. I ended a long term relationship that I was a part of. I kind of like changed the direction of like my life entirely because I finally sat with myself and realized like, oh, this is not what I want.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of discovery when you're, like, going into a field essentially of, like, self-discovery.
Literally. And
Yeah.
then the work is endless, you know? Once you
Mhm.
start, you'll out like that's what's scary too, because it's like there is no end to it, but that's also exciting because there's no end to it
Mhm.
and you can continue to discover things and yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's also like, you get to a point where I think in me, like when you've gone really, really deep, and it's like at this point it's just kind of like existential. Like at this point, it's like, what do I want to take from this?
Yes.
Or, does this experience have to hold meaning? Can it just be
Mhm.
something that happened that I don't have to look really, I had in my internship, I had a lot of clients that were really curious about why. They want to know, everybody wants to know why. They
Everyone
want to
wants
know,
to know why. Yeah.
they want to know why. And they're like, why do I do this? Why do I say this? And I had one that I just had to be like, girl, who gives a shit? Like, you keep trying to figure out why. It doesn't matter. I mean, in some situations, yeah, it does matter and you want to know, but I'm like, are you this person, well, I should say this person was an intellectualizer.
Sure,
And
sure.
so I'm like, you want to know why because you want to try to figure out some equation, whatever. So with the intellectualizer, I had to say, let's take why off of the table and
Mm,
let's look at like what do we actually do with what we're experiencing now? And then maybe we can go back into the why. Because
of
I think I did too for a long time. I got obsessed with the why. I'm like,
course.
um, how
Yeah.
did this happen?
Oh, yes, I love this, and I feel like if that was my client, so if I was gonna go from, like, a somatic perspective, I would say, like, what is it like to sit with the unknown?
Mm,
Like, what is it like to not know? What comes up
mhm.
for you in your body?
Yeah, and how is this powerlessness, and what's your relationship to powerlessness and control? Yeah, what does that feel like, and why is it so uncomfortable? Actually, I said why. Take why off, and just experience that it's really that this is uncomfortable for you.
Yes, exactly,
Mhm.
exactly.
How does someone reconnect with their body? Like, it's when this is my assumption that after a lot of trauma, after a lot of adverse experiences, you may feel disconnected from your body and
Yes,
your experiences, as
totally.
I as I think I have like struggled with anxiety, and so sometimes I was anxious about was not proportionate to what was happening.
Sure.
So in that case, I was like really disconnected, like my body was disconnected from my brain and from a lot of things.
Hmm,
What is it? And I know that looks like a lot of different, it looks different in a lot of different people.
sure.
How do you reconnect those things? What does it look like to, I don't know, to develop a connection between what's happening and what I'm experiencing? I don't know. Is anything coming up for you there?
Totally, yeah, yeah, that's a really good question. So, like I already said, slowing down truly it's everything. Like in sessions when people are trying to like go through something real fast, I'll say like, okay, like let's walk back for a second. Let's, I saw that little teary moment, or I saw, you exhaled really big here. What was that? Um and then what also I try to help people recognize, because I think people see healing as this really scary big beast, and sometimes it is. Like sometimes it really is scary, but also it can be liberating and fun and joyful in a way that I think people don't recognize, because you're not only connecting to the pain, you're reconnecting to the joy, right?
Mhm.
It's not just about feeling that negative experience, but it's about feeling that so that you can actually experience other positive feelings in your life. So
Mm.
what that looks like is, I'll ask clients like, what do you like to do for fun? Like simple. What do you do for fun? Do you have time for fun? Like what does that look like for you? What
Mhm.
did you like to do when you were a kid? How do you like um yeah, so a lot of times it's through that. I also ask clients to kind of pay attention to throughout the week once we've like done some work together. It's like, where do you feel joy? Like, do you get joy when you're brushing your teeth? Like, what about when you have a nice warm shower? Like, what
Mm.
about when you're outside in the sun and you feel the breeze and you feel the warmth? Like, what are those moments when you can tap into the positive sensations as well?
Mm. It's interesting to like with mindfulness and stuff, of just being
Totally.
aware of what's going on.
Totally.
And yeah, just what you were describing triggered like some like relaxation feelings.
I saw the little shoulders drop, I saw the exhale, I was like, "Oh,
Mhm.
yes."
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about yeah, so it's very hot here.
Mm,
I'm assuming it's well, I don't think maybe I don't know what the
it's
weather's
pretty
like
nice
there.
in Santa Monica, like, summers are blessed here, like, it's
Um
not hot.
yeah, y'all get it. Y'all got it good over there weather-wise.
Yeah,
So it's really hot here, and last night I was taking the train home, and so the train cars are air conditioned.
yeah.
And if you get in a train car that's air conditioned, I would recommend just leave that train car and go to the next one. I had a friend of mine who had recently moved here and was like, "Yeah, the air conditioning was out on the train, like, all the way from like Harlem to, wherever." And I was like, "Girl, just get in the next car." And he was like, "Oh, you can do that?" I'm like, "Yes, you can." Just anyway. So that was some yap for you.
Oh,
So I yesterday I was on the way home. They're doing construct like maintenance or whatever on one of the trains that I regularly take.
okay.
And so I went home, I got home really late last night and I ended up kind of like sitting in the station. And if you're in the subway station in New York City in the summer, it's very hot. I mean,
Mm,
you're basically being cooked.
totally, totally.
And so I was just like sweating. And then when I got home, I was just like sticky. And what I was thinking of was last night, it's kind of like when you go to the beach, and you're kind of like sandy and whatever. And then you get in the shower and then you just feel this like sense of clean
Yes,
afterward. That's
yes.
what I was like relating that to. It's just that
Mm,
feeling of like I'm clean and I'm not like sticky and gross anymore. And
right, right.
yeah, that's what was coming up for me.
Right, yeah, and clean,
Hmm.
it sounds like for you, it shows up as, like, peaceful, like, it's
Hmm.
calmer, it's like there's an
Hmm.
exhale, there's a
Yeah.
relaxation that comes from that.
It's like it's almost representative of like it's over,
Mm,
or like it's or something. Yeah, like what you've done is like it's like relaxing time,
totally, totally.
you know.
I love that. Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. That's a
Especially
really
if
that's a good metaphor.
yeah, I'm gonna probably use that
Note that one.
for a while. So yeah, I'm also curious about the blending of somatic therapy and other modalities. So obviously, you know, it's typically good practice, and I'm just like fresh out of grad school, or I'm fresh, finishing grad school. So my mind is like very textbook right now, but the blending of modalities is obviously really like that's a pretty good thing because a lot of people may not one thing might not work for someone or whatever.
Sure.
What is it like for you blending somatic types of therapy or not even just somatic, but when you're working with trauma, like what does that look like for you to blend things? in work?
Totally. Oh, that's such a good question. And I remember coming out of grad school, I remember I had a professor that was like, "Oh, you're just going to develop your style over time." And I'm like, "But how? Like, how do you do that?
But how?
But how?" And literally, it just happens because you start to expose yourself to the things that are interesting to you. So, what I find are interesting to me, obviously somatics. I really like narrative therapy, so I try to integrate like people's stories, right? Like what do they tell themselves about this experience? What is the story of their life, and how does that impact the way that they embody themselves, right? So everything to me comes back to somatics because I really believe I was a former dancer. Like it's just what I love and what I think works. But even with things like CBT, like a lot of people kind of hate on CBT, but like I think there's a lot of useful tools, like controversial opinion here, but I think there's a lot of useful things. And then if you combine it with something like somatics, that kind of helps somebody embody a different way of thinking about something so it doesn't stay so cognitive, then there's a lot of value that you can get from that. Um, I'm thinking this is kind of a tangent, but also some clinicians who have really impacted me are clinicians in the field who are doing hip hop therapy. It's a lot of kind of narrative based work. Actually, in New York, JC Hall is an incredible hip hop therapist who created a studio in this neighborhood in the Bronx and has this program that's been going, I think, since 2014. But he's amazing. And so figuring out different ways to be creative with like the quote unquote clinical work, I think is really important. That's kind of a tangent. That's my soapbox, but
I love tangents.
yeah,
I I'm so I was thinking of something too because you mentioned I'm thinking about my own therapy and then what you mentioned with your experience in therapy. So when I did my own therapy, I did like my own trauma work and obviously I had not been trained or had any kind of experience into different modalities or anything at the time because I was still like an undergrad. I hadn't gone that deep yet.
totally.
So for me, and I want to know what it was like for you because your experience was a little different. When I started studying the treatments and the modalities kind of in grad school and an internship, I started to realize, oh, that's what they did with me. And
Mm,
or oh, that's what this therapist that I was working with, that's what they were doing. And I started to realize like, oh, you started a little later. So I'm curious about, did you have training in or education about some of the modalities that were used on you when you were in therapy? And then what was that like? Because for me, it was an after thing, right? Like I was like, oh, that's what they did.
totally.
But for you, it might have been a little different because you were probably learning about it or have already learned about it before the technique was used.
Yeah, totally.
Mhm.
So thankfully I started therapy early enough in my grad school life that I wasn't super in it, so I didn't see the man behind the curtain necessarily yet while I was doing it. As I progressed, I definitely was like, "Oh, I see, like, okay, so we're orienting right now," or, "Oh, we're, like, tapping into this sensation," or whatever. I specifically chose, like, a somatically oriented person, so because that's what I was interested in, and I so yeah, I don't think I saw all the tricks right away because I wasn't far enough into my grad school journey, but when I reflect back, I can see like, okay, yeah, like I see what he was doing, or like, Gestalt, he had me talking to different people and whatever, like, but I didn't necessarily realize that until later in my grad school career.
Mhm. How what was that like for you when you kind of had that realization of that's what we were doing? Was there anything for you there?
You know, I don't think it I love my therapist. I mean, he's incredible. And so it was just kind of like, like this is the magic. This is what's happening, you know? So I didn't really have any feelings like any type of way about it, but I definitely was like, oh, like this makes sense. Like I can see why he was doing this and I can
Mhm,
understand like why he approached in this way with me specifically, if that
mhm.
makes sense.
Yeah, something I'm thinking of too is what is it like for you when you have a client that doesn't really connect to the somatic modality? What is that? It's yeah, I mean, so I really, really love IFS. So internal family systems,
Super
parts
interesting.
work, like if someone is watching, they don't know what it is. I really, really connect with that. And that I feel like I'm really, really like I really lock in that.
Yeah.
And that doesn't work for everybody.
Mhm.
So I had people that I would like, try to use it with, and they just weren't, it wasn't for them. So we had to go in a different way or a different route. And that was fine, obviously. But I'm curious about for you, like when a client is not really, I guess, buying into the somatic experience, or that, or maybe they're not as connected and it seems more challenging for them. Where do you go there? What's your typical kind of route after that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, obviously, it's always about meeting the person where they're at. And if somebody's not connecting to the body piece, I I'm not going to force anybody to do that, right? Um, I think what I kind of fall back to is like seeing where they're at, like seeing if it's more intellectual, then I might do something like CBT or DBT kind of focused stuff. But ultimately, like in my own sneaky way, I do still try to have people tap in when they can, you know? So I'll like point out, like, oh, like you're thinking about this thing. Like I see, you know, it seems like there's a loop happening in your head, right? So, like, kind of giving language to what I see happening in a somatic way so that it's like people are connecting it, but not necessarily outright having to talk about it. So I guess it's like kind of feeding language, if that makes sense. Kind of like
Mhm.
play therapy, you know, when you like reflect back, like, oh, you feel this
Mhm.
or you blah, blah, blah. But like with the body, like, oh, I see your, you just exhaled, like what's coming up, you know?
Mhm. So what are if is there like a favorite grounding technique that you have, or is there a favorite like regulation tool that you have that is kind of like, do you have an MVP?
Yeah, I love a good spiral journal. I learned this, so my background was with AmeriCorps. Do you know what that is? Sometimes people do, sometimes people
It's
don't.
a charity, right?
So it's like a domestic Peace Corps. Do you know what Peace Corps is?
I know what the Peace Corps are.
Yeah. So it's basically like a domestic Peace Corps. It's government funded, whatever. I was part of this great program. And there was this woman who came in and did this thing called a spiral journal, which I'm trying to see if I have one on my floor somewhere because
Mm.
that's the life that I live. Let me hold on. Oh, I do. I was like, I know I have one around here. So basically, I use this for like literally almost every client. But so the idea is that you put into 4 quadrants, and I use this as a way to kind of help people check into their bodies. So you do the 4 quadrants, and then I'll say, like, okay, start in the center and draw a really slow, like tightly wound spiral. And that's meant to just help somebody kind of like focus on something and not have their brain going at a million miles a minute. And then I'll ask things, kind of related to the body. So I'll say, like, what sensations do you notice in your body right now? And then, like, okay, pick another quadrant. What's a time that you felt comfortable, happy, or safe? How could you tell that you felt happy, comfortable, or safe? Because a lot of times, like, people will say, like, oh, yeah, I felt this. But it's like, okay, but how could you tell? Like, what about
Mm.
your body indicated to you that you felt that? And then I'll ask people to notice in the present, what do you notice in your body now? So that's kind of one of my favorites. I really do enjoy helping people connect to those moments when they feel comfortable, safe, or happy, because that becomes a base when we start to do the other work. So it's like
Mm.
if people start to get too overwhelmed, then I can say, like, okay, remember that time with your grandpa where you were on the beach and you could feel the mist, and like really making it super sensation oriented so that people can kind of bring themselves back, if that
Mhm.
makes sense.
Yeah, they can kind of come
Titrate.
back to yeah, come back out.
Yeah,
I want to ask something about, I feel like we could have done a whole other thing on this, but
totally.
when it comes to interpersonal violence, domestic violence, what is something that you see a lot with clients that have experienced that? I think there's this, what I'm getting at is there's this question, right? I see this all the time because I'm brain rotted and I'm on social media too
Right.
much. And so I always see, like, if there's clips of DV or if there's clips of something happening, the thing that people always say is, why didn't you just leave? Or why are you tolerating this? Or blah, 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 which I think we both know is a ridiculous fucking question.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
for So let's give it some weight for a second.
Sure.
So what do you see in your work when you have people coming in that have really struggled to leave certain situations or have really struggled to to move on, to move away from something, or they're even still in a situation or something like that? What does that look like for you? What are those things that are keeping people there?
Yeah, so there are so many so many different factors. For one, like a lot of times there's a dependence on the abusive person. So, whether that's financial or emotional, people feel like they're not going to be able to live without that person. There are people have been isolated from their friends and families, and they feel like maybe they won't have a community to support them. Um, Maybe they don't even know that things can be different. A lot of times people will equate that with love, like, oh, like this person just cares about me. Like they just, I did something wrong. They'll blame themselves. Like I was the one who, talked to so and so, or I did this, and kind of take the self blame instead of looking at, how the other person is impacting them. Um, I'm trying to think how else that shows up. And I think a lot of times too, it's a cycle, right? Like a lot of times people come from homes where violence was kind of normal, in some sense, whether it was physical, emotional, sexual, like something was normalized to equate that violence with love. So a lot of times it can feel like, you know, home is home, even if it's unhealthy, right? So if you're in a home where, parents are fighting and beating each other up all the time, that feels like home. That feels familiar. That's what your nervous system knows how to handle, right? Whereas like if you're in a healthy relationship with somebody that actually cares about you and gives you love and that space, it can feel like, oh my, I don't even know what to do with this right now. Like
Mhm.
I what? Right? It's like unfamiliar, and unfamiliar is unsafe.
Yeah, your body becomes, you're like, "What's going on?" Or what I would see a lot too is people saying like, "Oh, I'm bored. I'm so
Yeah,
bored
literally.
with this
Yeah,
safe person."
totally.
And I'm curious, like, are you actually bored, or are you just kind of like don't really know what to do without all these alarm bells
Love
going off all the
chaos.
time?
Right,
Mhm.
right. Totally.
Yeah. I I think restaurants have been really helpful for me in that way because, like, the chaos of a restaurant is like you can channel it there.
Totally. Yes.
Um, just working in restaurants and undergrad and grad school, and so that was like a really like a little thing.
Yeah, totally.
So I wanna ask you kind of like my final rounding out question
Yeah.
that I typically ask, and this is the sad part of the interview where I know, and towards the end, and so I wanna ask you some of the best advice you've ever gotten. So, is there a quote or is there something you heard someone say that you're like, "That's really stuck with you?" And I think I just love to hear sometimes people say, "This person said this to me and it changed the way I would," whatever.
Yeah,
I'm
mhm.
curious about if there's a quote for you that you have or that you heard that I don't know.
Yeah, so there's this, like, quote that I love, and funny enough, it wasn't from a person, it was from Urban Outfitters. They had, like, some, little, like, quote poster thing, but
Mhm,
it really stuck with me, and I was like, "Oh, I love this," and I think it's like, anything can be fixed with a little bit of salt water, sweat, tears, or the sea. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, that, like, covers everything," right? It's like you're either gotta work like, you gotta work through something, you gotta cry it out, or you just gotta go see the ocean,
mhm.
remember. Get
It
existential with it.
Yeah, it's like Urban Outfitters, you kinda ate that, like, "Wait a minute, why am
Yeah,
I feeling something?" I saw something the other day that I don't know, just things that make you feel things. I saw
yeah.
something the other day that was like, if you were in a room with everybody that you've ever known, to your life up until this point, who is the first person you would go to?
Aw,
And I was like, that I thought it was really beautiful.
that is really
I was
beautiful.
like, "Wait a minute, who would I go to?" Anyway.
That's a good
Mhm.
question. Do you have an
Yeah,
answer?
I can't answer it because I know, but I can't answer it because I feel like there's too many people in my life that would, you know, take it personally.
Sure. Yeah, I hear
Mhm.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I can't it's, like, noted in the back of my head, but, I don't know, I can never reveal it. Maybe I'll reveal it, like, on my deathbed. I'm like, "This is who it was."
This is who. I'm gonna hold you to that. I'll come find you.
You should come find me. Um, I love that. Natalie, thank you so much. It's been awesome. I am so jealous that you're in this, like, beautiful beach town. Maybe
Yes.
I'll make I don't know, I could move there one day, but
Come on out.
I gotta do my time in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I've loved chatting with you, and I'm excited to see you on social media and see what else you get into.
Yes, totally. Same. Yeah, keep doing your thing. This was really fun. Thank you. I'm really excited to be connected to you, and we're friends now. So
Yay, we're besties. All right.
that's
Thank
nice.
you.
Hey, thank you.